This week on the agenda, chip wars. Are semiconductors the new front line in a global trade battle? And if so, just who's winning? The rise of AI is set to send the semiconductor industry skyrocketing to a value of over $1 trillion by 2030. But as the market expands, so too does the battle for global control. So who is really leading the way? And where do chips fit into the current ongoing trade tensions? With me now are Dr. Stephen Hai, Assistant Professor in Tech Innovations at Xi'an Jiaotong Liverpool University and Affiliate Fellow at King's Institute for Artificial Intelligence. Malcolm Penn, Founder and CEO of Future Horizons. And Christopher Thomas, Chairman of Integrated Insights. Great to have all of you on the agenda. Stephen, let me start with you and with the basics. Just why are chips so crucial beyond smartphones and electric cars?
Beyond chips' crucial role in consumer electronics, chips are the very scaffolding a new industrial revolution, a general-purpose technology whose significance parallels that of electricity and even combustion engine. The chips are not simply products. They are the enabler infrastructure powering a range of critical sectors that are redefining economic, tech innovation, and social progress. Semiconductors serve as the pillar of modern technology that are critical to our daily life, such as artificial intelligence, cloud computing, data services, electric vehicle, and high-performance computing, the supercomputers. Meanwhile, the dual-use nature of chips makes them a matter of national security and geopolitical power. So in short, chips are no longer just component of products. They are the core enabler of national power in the 21st century and beyond. Thank you.
So Malcolm, what do you think? Because semiconductors are sometimes referred to these days as the new oil. And I'm thinking, where do you think these high-end chips fit in to modern national economic and industrial policy?
Yes, I mean, that term, the new oil of the industry, was coined way back in the 1970s by one of the industry founding fathers, Jerry Sanders. It was him that first came out with that suggestion. And it's so true. But, the chip is hidden. We don't see it anywhere. So it's buried beneath layers of products that we use every day. And so it's always been the unsung hero. But it drives everything. I mean, it's hard to think of a single product or activity that we do today that doesn't owe its very functionality to the silicon chip. So, I mean, I think it's vitally important for a whole bunch of reasons. And suddenly the world woke up after COVID, when we had the shortages and we couldn't buy anything. The world suddenly woke up to the fact there were these things called chips. Whereas beforehand, I'd tell people I'm in the chip industry and they'd look at me aghast and wonder what on earth I was talking about. Now at least we know about it. So without the chip, the world would stop. I mean, it really would stop completely. And I think suddenly now people are realizing that we've outsourced production so much over the last 20 years. We suddenly realized also not only their importance, but the fact that all of the production is now not done locally. And so if that supply chain stopped, we would be starved overnight. So it always become weaponized.
Christopher, in terms of economic power, then, which countries, which regions do you see are positioned to emerge as the new semiconductor powerhouses over the next decade or so?
Well, I think we need to understand a little bit about how this semiconductor ecosystem works.
Yeah.
This ecosystem is very complex, it changes very slowly, and it's led by engineers who are very conservative about moving to new locations or choosing new suppliers. Right now, today, companies from the US, Europe, Korea, Taiwan, China, and Japan control about 92% of the global semiconductor industry, with the US being about 52% global share, China about 5% global share. I actually expect that those ratios will not change very much over the next decade. They may change on the margins, But I see it unlikely that a new emerging region that's trying to invest, such as India, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, will gain substantial share. They may get a foothold with certain companies, certain specific segments where they may play a role in the broader value chain in which they're doing something around packaging or design or other things. But I actually think this supply chain and this ecosystem moves slowly, and today's winners are best positioned to be the future winners. Now, share may shift between those regions going forward, but at the same time, this is probably the most difficult global industry in which to break in due to economies of scale, learning efficiencies, and other things that really favor incumbents.
Everybody's nodding along there. Stephen, let me bring you back in. I mean, would you agree? I mean, who are the key players and where is the really exciting stuff happening?
Thanks. It is indeed a critical question as it encourages us to comprehend the multidimensional complexity of the semiconductor ecosystem. Global stage is not defined by a single actor, but by a deeply interconnected web of states and enterprises, each striving for position, advantage in a contest that is as much geopolitical as it is commercial. Regarding the key players, I think it's a multipolar landscape of specialization. The contemporary semiconductor landscape is defined not by a single dominant player, but by a complex multipolar distribution of power and specialization across the value chain. So in terms of regional and global powerhouse, we definitely have the United States, which maintains high lead in high volume areas like chip design and intellectual property with firms like we all know, NVIDIA, AMD, Qualcomm, Broadcom, you name it, right? So in the meantime, TSMC from Taiwan is without doubt the true giant of global supply chain, accounting for more than half the global foundry market, and it's undisputed leader in advanced logic chip manufacturing. Then we also have South Korea and Japan as a very conventional classic player. But in the meantime, we all have been noticing China is strengthening and accelerating its role as a key player in the assembling, testing, and packaging sector, as well as in the production of mature node chips. Its domestic champions, such as SMIC, Huawei, YMTC, are making significant strides in indigenous innovation. So, of course, without no doubt, the Netherlands with its specialized equipment. So we have this interconnected web between companies and countries. Well, and also exciting development regarding the new frontier of innovation. We have this 2 nanometer race and even angstrom nodes, which angstrom node basically means 0.1 nanometer. And we have also, as Chris just mentioned about it, the chip lab, 3D IC and advanced packaging. But probably for me, perhaps the most exciting and dynamic development is the full level geopolitical context itself regarding the global semiconductor ecosystem. Thank you.
Malcolm, we've heard some of the big names that we've all heard about there, but what about emerging companies trying to break into the market? I mean, like China's Cambricon, or is the market getting saturated?
Well, I mean, I think following on from what the last two speakers said, it takes an awful long time for people to gain traction in the industry. And when you look around at the leaders of today, companies like NVIDIA, the Darling, they've been around 25 years or so. TSMC that makes all of the chips for everybody, they're another 25, 30-year-old company. And, you know, a rule of thumb is it takes at least 10 years before you gain traction, and then another 10 years before you actually make a mark on the world. So there's this 20-year wait, which has been applicable for every single large, successful company in the world. But we forget about that part of it. Yeah. So, but the industry thrives on innovation. It thrives on new companies entering the market because it's the new companies which really develop the emerging technologies, which the big companies and their established roadmaps and everything else find very hard to break into because they don't want to disrupt the model that's making them tons of money right now. So that opens the door for all of these innovative companies to come in. Now, where do these companies come from? Traditionally, they've been predominantly from the United States, with a splattering from Europe and a lesser splattering from Japan. Can China be part of the new wave? I think absolutely yes. I mean, there's no doubt about it that their design capability, their innovativeness in design is very, very strong, very powerful, and they're very creative. I mean, most of the companies in the West, the successful companies, have hired engineers from China because they're good. Okay, so if these good Chinese engineers actually started up their own company, if they were able to do that, then there's no reason why most of them, or some of them certainly, could not become the next NVIDIA or the next, well, not the next Intel because they're on the downhill, but the next NVIDIA, okay? But it will take time and there will be a huge fallout in between that time there. But the keys to this are not just simply having a good idea and a good technology. You've got to have the infrastructure behind you to enable you to actually grow and flourish. And that's not just simply having the engineers, it also means having a financial system that wants to take risks and investing in startups, which most will fail. So you've got to have that kind of atmosphere in the country with the financial community, with the whole community really, which allows allows these companies to actually develop their roots and eventually to flourish.
Christopher, we're talking here about things taking time, which seems to fly in the face of the fast-paced technology we're all used to talking about. Where do you see the growth coming from?
Well, I think you need to remember that in the semiconductor industry, growth depends on two things. One is, as we've said, innovation, which is innovation in the core technology itself. You need to be able to do something you couldn't do in the past, cheaper, better, faster, and innovation in the usage model, where downstream people who are buying chips are doing new things that people want to pay for and create growth. In addition, and this is a very important thing, a semiconductor by itself has no value. It's just an innate object. You can't eat it, you can't drink it, you can't get entertained by it. Semiconductor companies need their customers to be successful and make money. That's critically important. So where will that happen? I mean, obviously, the watchword these days is AI, AI, AI. And what we've really been speaking about is AI in the data center, which is about training and creating these giant models, which are giving us ChatGPT or DeepSeek or Qwen or all these different interesting models coming out of the US, China, and other places. There's a lot of expectation in the market that that will continue to grow. And I've seen forecasts where that could get 2 to 3 to 4 times larger in the next 5 years. There's also skepticism on that because, again, to fund that growth of the underlying technology, you need downstream services, you need things, end customers paying money for the AI services, for the model, for the applications and other things to fund that. That revenue has not shown up yet, so we're sort of investing ahead of the curve. This is a risk for the industry. Where else will the growth come from? It will also come from as AI moves from the core data center into devices, into end products. You'll need to upgrade the computing and the capability of your refrigerator, your PC, your phone, your car to take these in. Where's another big area of growth? Electrification, which is a place where China's leading the world. As you electrify, as you move from AC to DC power, to green power, you need a tremendous amount of power semiconductors and the logic that controls those power semiconductors to make that power be used efficiently. And then this is actually, I think, a really big challenge for the industry. Most chips today still go into PCs, phones, and cars, the old mainstays of the industry. Those industries are not growing on a secular basis. The pie is not getting bigger. Yeah. So you're trying to put more semiconductor content into a flat pie. Semiconductors need to gain more share of wallet, which means maybe your customers make less. We need to find a way to make all of those industries grow faster, which means new, exciting consumers and exciting people saying, I want to upgrade a PC, I want to buy a new car, all of these things. This is sort of a hidden challenge of the industry right now, which will determine how much growth we have in the next 5 to 10 years.
A less hidden challenge, of course, though, are external factors. I wonder, Malcolm, what you think and the short to medium-term impact's going to be of export bans, of tariffs, on sanctions on semiconductor production, to global economies more broadly.
Yeah, well, these are going to take an awful long time before their true impact will actually impact everything. There's a short-term impact. If someone puts a tariff, then that has to be dealt with in the immediacy of the business there. But companies will not simply move a factory on the basis of a tariff that's introduced. in the near term, because that tariff could be taken away again in 3 or 4 years' time when there's a new administration. So those kind of decisions take a long time. I mean, it takes at least 3 years to build a new factory. So even if people said, we're going to build a factory today, you won't see that for another 3 years, at which time there could well be a new government and infrastructure in place. So you're not going to sit around in the boardroom and make these decisions now, which are going to affect you over a long period of time. But you have to deal with them. So there will be a cost impact, which is going to impact somewhere. Somebody's going to have to pay that. And eventually that someone is going to be a consumer somewhere down the line. And that will mean, and in fact, that will stifle demand to a greater or lesser extent. No one really knows how much. But at the end, it's not going to have a positive impact in a grand way that says people are going to go out and buy more chips. It's going to slow down the market in the near to medium term, which is not what the industry wants. I mean, it likes growth, but it only grows by selling units, by selling more bits and pieces. So if you start to put an added price on there, the normal supply and demand economics means that, you know, for some people, that will push them into the unaffordable zone there.
Yeah.
And I guess that links in with what else we've been saying.
Yeah.
For this whole thing to take off, you've got to have a price reduction on chips. You can't sell a $35,000 NVIDIA chip in a refrigerator or even a car, okay? And you certainly can't put that in a smartphone. So therefore, you know, we're talking about a whole new generation of AI chips, which are going to be $100 price range before you'll see a real market take off and stimulate real demand. Right now, we're playing around with a very unique, niche part of the market.
A niche part of the market, lots of pressures on the industry. Stephen, are we on the brink of a chip crisis, or is there hope for a more stable and equitable global chip ecosystem?
It is indeed a critical question that goes to the very heart of global semiconductor development, even dilemma. And to answer it, we must recognize that semiconductor ecosystem exists in a state of constantly dynamic contestation, not a simple binary stability or crisis. So we are neither on the brink of total collapse, nor on the edge of an equitable utopia. Rather, we are witnessing a purposeful, though often contentious, global recalibration in response to a crisis that has already passed, one that has fundamentally altered how state and companies think about resilience. The notion of looming crisis is rooted in the very structure of previously established global supply chain that is not fully ready and prepared for the current era of AI and tech innovation around. The current tension crisis has been encouraging different stakeholders to make diverse efforts to build a more resilient and, by extension, more stable ecosystem. This is where the hope for new equilibrium lies. The logic of the market, once dictated by Q cost, is now being tempered by the logic of strategic security, and this shift is yielding tangible results. Therefore, we are witnessing a new era industrial policy, the growing regionalization of chip foundry, as well as accelerated maturation of ecosystem, diverse ecosystem in semiconductors, represented by emerging powers like China, like the Middle East players, even from the global south and other frontier tech innovation sectors. So in conclusion, the semiconductor world is not hanging over the edge of cliff. The crisis has been recognized and the responses are diverse yet strong. The challenge is that the very act of deglobalization, with nations and companies acting in their own strategic self-interest, may lead to a more unstable outcome. However, the new stability will not be without its challenges. We are therefore moving toward a more resilient global ecosystem, one defined by more decentralized, dynamic, and multipolar landscape.
Christopher, I want to talk about the role of government in shaping the industry. Is there a danger that too much intervention or investment might lead to overcapacity in certain parts of the industry?
Well, this industry has always been cyclical. We're always going to have the bullwhip. And in fact, we've been through a very robust cyclical cycle across most sectors the last 6 years since the beginning of COVID, 5 years. A cyclical up and then a cyclical down. For a while, you couldn't get any chips you needed, and now there's too many of them. So overcapacity, overinvestment will continue. Right now in AI chips, in the most advanced AI chips, we have cyclical undercapacity. We have more demand than can be supplied by the market. But in the past, if you had overcapacity, it wasn't structural. Companies could go out of business, they could sell their equipment, they could idle their factories, they could do other stuff so that eventually demand caught up with too much supply. But if the government steps in and says, no, we need you to keep supplying because you're a critical part of our ecosystem, or you have a lot of employees and we don't want civil unrest, or because you pay taxes or something else, then you could have some level of structural overcapacity. And right now, I do think we see it in certain areas. In mature node semiconductors, 28 nanometer and above, basically the market is flat. The total amount of wafers required has been flat for 2 or 3 years, but there's still very heavy investment by certain players in the industry, which are leading to lower utilization rates and dropping margins. So we do see that. The question, of course, is how long can governments pay for this? Governments are never infinitely flush with cash. And why keep failing companies or failing factories alive? Especially because usually when you have overcapacity, you're generally also hurting other companies in that industry inside your own borders because you're involving them in a price war, you're bringing them in and you're hurting their margins. So I think over time, governments will realize the folly of overinvestment and investing in poor capacity and let market forces play. But in the near term, we are seeing some issues due to this, as I mentioned before.
Malcolm, how far are we away from truly revolutionary advancements in the chip design and in the manufacturing? I mean, where are we in terms of quantum chips, for example?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I think the next, probably to my mind, the next real breakthrough will be the transition to when we start to introduce quantum electronics into the overall supply chain. And that is a real radical step forward, which will involve a whole new way of designing, a whole new way of manufacturing, maybe not quite so radically on the manufacturing side, but certainly a whole new way of developing systems and chip design. And how far away are we from that? Probably another 10 years or so, I would imagine, because we're getting there. We're learning how to at least build a stable computer using quantum electronics. But they're real sort of Heath Robinson type contraptions. It's not the sort of thing you'd be putting on your desktop anytime soon. But we're learning how to do it. And they have done some initial early stages of demonstrable capability. So that's a good step forward. There's a lot of resource going into this. But I think before you get the first real sort of production-oriented equipment out there, it's probably at least another 10 years before we'll start to see that. But it'll be a gradual process. It won't be an overnight, and it won't be to replace what we've got. It'll coexist. It will do new things and open up new barriers and new frontiers, which we couldn't do before. But it will coexist alongside the classical infrastructure that we built up over the last 60 or 70 years.
Stephen, we've talked about innovation and the technology itself, but what about people? This week, China introduced its new K visa to help attract tech talent to its shores. Do you think that that is perhaps where the next battle is going to come from?
Well, much of the public discourse on the chip war focuses on the hardware. The true race is for human and talent capital. The talent behind the technology is the most enduring source of innovation. And in that regard, you're absolutely right. The battle for people is where the next and perhaps most critical frontier is emerging. China's introduction of the new K visa is a clear and calculated move in its human capital competition globally. It is a direct response to the recent tightening of skilled worker visas around the world, and also to one particular country. So indeed, the timing is deeply significant as it follows the new announcement of a US H-1B visa charge or a systemic upgrade, that is to say. So this policy aligns critical with China's long-standing strategic goals, achieving technology breakthrough. While the nation has an abundant supply of domestic STEM graduates, it is still has some critical gaps in specialized advanced fields, particularly in semiconductors. So this K-visa in Beijing's eye is a strategic tool to attract the foreign expertise needed to bridge these gaps. So, and also essentially it's a battle for mind and is critical technology innovation frontier. While the K-visa signals an openness to foreign talent, its effectiveness remains to be seen, as the policy still has ambiguities concerning key details like specific measurement, qualification, the residency pathway, family sponsorship, and also the domestic feedbacks. Thank you.
Christopher, what do you think? How much will competition in semiconductor skills capability affect relative national power of global countries?
Well, that's a complicated question because I tend to think of governments think about just what happens inside of their borders, and they think just about their domestic economy. Most very successful semiconductor companies are truly global and get talent from all over the world. They just think in a different construct. And so a company may be US headquartered or Japanese headquartered or Chinese headquartered, but it can get talent and put our research and development anywhere in the world. And doing that successfully, they can both contribute to national success while also their own company success. I do think it's really important to point out about how important foreign-born talent has been to the U.S. semiconductor industry. More than half of the CEOs of the top 25 semiconductor companies were born outside the United States. And about half of the U.S. semiconductor workforce is foreign-born. It's truly unbelievable how international that workforce in the United States is. And so I do think that talent is incredibly important, but you need an expansive view of talent. Any talent that says we only care about what happens inside our national borders, we are just about our own technological self-reliance, we just want to do it ourselves, sends the wrong message. This is all about how can we make ourselves as attractive as possible for people all over the world to buy our products and for people all over the world to work for our companies no matter where they live. This is something where China is very, 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 very early. Chinese companies are probably the least diverse global companies today. This means there's a lot of upside for China going forward if they can improve on this.
Christopher Thomas, Stephen Hai, Malcolm Penn, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out The Agenda Show on TikTok. Coming up on a future agenda, Out of This World, we'll look into the geopolitics of the new space race. But for now, from me, Juliet Mann, and from all of the Agenda team here in London, goodbye.